My name is David Lovejoy, and I started off doing ceramics, but I also do assemblage and stick sculpture, a very specific type of stick sculpture because of an artist that I've worked with. And I basically think of myself as kind of a glorified carpenter. It's all based on carpentry.
And how has your background sort of influenced your artistic style?
I started off in clay, and one of the things that interested me in clay is that you could just make things up, just out of whole cloth, just imagine a thing and make it. And in my clay work, I was always trying to capture kind of the patinas and textures of old, dried, worn things. And then I found myself just working with those old, dried, worn things. And so there was kind of, my interest was similar, but I was finding that in different things, along the way.
The ceramic work was the Raku style,
Yes,
correct?
Yes. Yeah, I started off in high school doing high fire. And then when I was at Saddleback College, I was working fairly large and not many people were. And so basically I had to fill a whole section of a kiln with my work and a few other people working tall before we could fire it. And as I'm waiting, I'm looking at my bisque work getting all dusty and stuff, and I look down the way and people are doing raku and taking it home that night. Because what you would do is you would create something with a certain vision, but as a student, you're continually getting new projects and doing new things. And so maybe months later when you get that piece back, you've lost that thread that you were tugging on. You're not similarly inspired. You've had other experiences and other thoughts in the meantime. And so being able to just glaze something and fire it immediately was exciting to me. And I'm a little bit of a pyromaniac. I used to love fireworks and things like that as a kid. So being able to actually work with the fire and learn how to do that so that the fire is its own influence. I'm not the creator of my raku work. I form the stuff, but the fire has the final decision, and I can kind of steer it, but it's still always an unknown.
Then how did you move from that into the assemblages work that you create?
It was kind of two things coming together at once. My wife is an engineer, and at one time she had a big kind of 1.5 year long project she was working on in Oregon. And at that time, I had been working I was director of marketing for a manufacturing company down in Orange County. And we discussed it. It was kind of like, you've always wanted to try your art full time, and this might be an opportunity. And so I went up there, and then coming back, we settled into a house in Pasadena, and the power system couldn't support my kilns. And so there was a little time where I could not make new work. And so I started taking things that, not really clunkers, but things that I hadn't shown or exhibited or tried to sell, but I kept them, ceramic works that I kept because there was some element that I really liked. And so I started just taking bits of molding and wire and things like that and adding things onto these fired pots. And that was my first assemblage work. There's always this kind of conflict between art and craft with ceramic is concerned, because it comes from a vessel utilitarian oriented thing and then became art. And somewhere along the line, a lot of people didn't accept that. And so that is part of the dialogue, completely unnecessary, that accompanies anything you try to do creatively with clay. Mm-hmm. And just doing wall work, a rectangle that hangs on the wall is more familiar. It's easier for people to identify with. Mm-hmm. And so it was just easier to show.
And I've seen on your business card, too, that you describe yourself as a thing maker. So what is it that your work aims to say with thing making?
Well, what I do, it falls within the art world by default. Mm-hmm. I found myself always trying to have to kind of explain myself and find a title that fit. I wasn't a ceramic artist. I came up with ceramist for a while, rather than ceramicist, which was kind of a made-up word. And after having a made-up word, it's like, well, I can just make up any word. And I can stand firmly behind anything that I've made and defend it as a thing. I imagine a thing and I say, gee, what would it be like if? And then I make that thing and I've answered that question. Because my interest is not really in the thing, it's in the making. I enjoy answering the question, if you will. I wonder what it would look like, and I put it together and I say, oh, okay, that's what it would look like. And then I can set it aside.
So how do you then draw inspiration to make a new piece?
My inspiration basically is fun. I enjoy what I do, and then I enjoy other people's interest and enjoyment in what I do. I appreciate what I refer to as the patina of use, things that have been around and handled for a long time, like an old banister or something like that. And so when I find those things in the waste stream somewhere, whether at a thrift shop or an antique store or whatever, all those things are on their way deteriorating. I like to save those things. And especially if I can pull them out of context to where it's a little unfamiliar, the inside of a sewing machine or a vacuum cleaner or something like that, no one's ever seen that. And so some of those parts, you can change the context and it still has that patina being around forever, and yet we've never seen it. And so that kind of familiarity, unfamiliarity, I like playing with.
I think depth is a great way to describe a lot of your work because there's so much to explore in all of them. A piece that you showed me specifically, the name is, I believe, Writer's Block, that has the typewriter in it, and then you have the die with suggestions for prompts.
For solving writer's block,
Right.
yes.
So how do you want people to interact with your work then? Are they meant to explore and open up and peer through?
Well, it really depends on how it's exhibited. Because when I'm in a group show, I have a responsibility to the other artists. And I learned very early on that if my work on the wall is next to someone else's work, that maybe it's an assemblage show, there's some similarities. But my work is meant to be touched and tinkered with, and you spin things, and then those same active hands go on to the next piece. And it's like, oh no, wait, I don't know if that's that person's intention. You can't do that. And so in that kind of instance, I try to rein that in a bit. But it is intended to be handled by me and by whoever owns it. So if someone wants to play with it, they can acquire it and take it home and play with it to their heart's content. But especially with my shop at the Last Bookstore, I get a real broad range of traffic as far as their involvement in seeing art, their age, etc. And so stuff that is meant to be handled isn't meant to be handled by 100 people a day.
Right.
So that kind of thing I need to rein in. But it doesn't stop me. I just kind of hold those things back. And if someone is interested in my work, we have a little conversation. I say, there's this thing I want to show you. And we go around the corner and see this thing.
You mentioned the Last Bookstore, and you do have work throughout the Last Bookstore too. What is it like to create in your style for public work that is definitely going to be handled?
That is probably one of the strengths of my ability now, is having had that experience. The Last Bookstore is in the Spring Arts Tower, and the Spring Arts Tower before the Last Bookstore was the Spring Arts Tower. It's a building full of creatives. Basically, they moved in downstairs, and then they said, this isn't quite enough room. Can we rent half of the mezzanine? And so the owner of the building rented them half the mezzanine. And when the bookstore rented half of it, the owner of the building decided, well, now it's retail. It's active retail by bringing the bookstore up. So he asked the artists within the building, is anybody interested in coming down to the mezzanine and populating that? So he built out some little shops. And that kind of coincided with the bookstore building out that mezzanine. So as they were building things, and I was noticing little nooks and crannies as they were, they're moved along, and it's like, oh, they left a spot. And I would talk to the owner and say, hey, can I do a little thing there? Just, you've seen my style of work. And he usually agreed. And so there were little accents added on. And another artist there, Jena Priebe, we'd collaborated a lot on a few things. As a matter of fact, the bookcase pieces at the top of the stairs is something that we both built together. Josh, the owner of the bookstore, had some creative ideas and already knew some well-known artists that he brought artwork in. But then he brought artwork into an art building. And so he included us as well. And then I, having carpentry skills and stuff, that relationship continued. And I've built a lot of the shelves and later iterations of things that had deteriorated. There's a porthole made out of books. And the one that's there now, I believe, is the third one. Josh's father built the first, and I built the other two. And I'm actually planning to build a third soon, because the one that's there now is getting a little tattered. Everyone's always curious. They have to pick at corners and things. So that kind of hardening came from that experience. Also along that time, I was doing stick work at the Natural History Museum. And the Natural History Museum had just opened a new garden, and part of the focus of that garden was letting children just be children. So there wasn't a lot of signage, don't do this. There wasn't a lot of, there's not a playground monitor. And so the stick sculptures were getting picked apart as well. Kids were pulling sticks out and trying to reweave in their own way and having sword fights and whatever. And so over that time, I learned how to harden that material as well. So it's just, I opened my work up to the public and then changed it, but the look of it is similar. It's just a matter of how you fasten things and how you putting things behind glass rather than leaving them out in the front where you can see the texture and stuff. So it's a little give and take. Yeah, and you read the environment. Quite often when I'm doing something for a hotel or restaurant or something like that, it might be up out of reach, and then you can just go nuts. So I do.
And you've also recently opened the Makery here on the corner or edge of Little Tokyo.
Yes.
Could you describe some of what this space is meant to be?
It is a large studio and a large space, larger than I need. But rather than divide it up, what I want to do is leave it all one big studio. So we each have our own little corner for our own thing, but then we also have a larger space to share. And that's meant to be named the Makery. It's more about the making than the exhibiting. So we do have an exhibition gallery, and we have shows coming up that we do, and also that we curate, that we host. We also rent the gallery. But yeah, it's been interesting, and it's been fun as people discover us. We're on the edge of Skid Row, and so it is a broad range of neighbors, but they are our neighbors. So yeah, it's been interesting.
And you did mention that this is one large studio space. How do you interact with the other artists then?
There are different practices. As I mentioned, I'm more of a carpenter. I work a lot with wood. There is also a glass artist, Cathy Milligan, who does beadwork and glass blowing and fused glass, slumped glass, etc. We have several kilns here of hers. And then Cathy Immordino, who does collage and photography and bookmaking and all kinds of things. And so each of us have our own tools. And as we add that to the Makery, then the Makery basically has all of those skills and tools. And so then we also had someone interested in teaching culinary classes here. And for me, that was a little, well, no, that, you know, a little record scratch in my mind. Like, no, this is an art place. But then I thought about it. It's like, well, no, that's making. And it's not like this is a restaurant that's preparing food. You're learning to do the thing. And that's what this is all about.
What direction do you have planned for your artwork? Do you have future ambitions of things you're wanting to make?
I believe at 60 that I may have already made my masterpiece. I've had a couple of things that just were really cool. It's not that I don't have long-term goals, but I don't have these idealistic things that I want to achieve. It's not like I want to be remembered as an artist, because I'm more about the process of it. And if I could teach other people to make stuff, then that's more of a legacy for me than having stuff. I mentioned Patrick Doherty, who I learned the stick work from. He's very much about the making, and the things that he's making are huge and monumental and temporary. The longest lived one will probably be 20 years. And it's maybe 1 out of 100 that lives for 20 years, because he's building it out of sticks and they're out in nature. And if you get snow and lightning and whatever else and idiots starting bonfires, you know, it's just a stack of dry sticks eventually. And so nature takes its course. But I admire that he puts so much craftsmanship and expertise into something that's going to be temporary. And so I'm fine with that. That's one of the reasons I turned to Raku, because I know that civilizations have been judged and evaluated and rated by the shards that we've found. And we say, oh, by this piece of pottery, we can tell this about this civilization. And that's way more responsibility than I wanted, because I was making some pretty clunky pots, high fired, they'll last forever. And so Raku won't last that long. Our civilization won't be judged by my Raku work. And I'm quite comfortable with that.
Well, where can people go to see more of your work and learn about the Makery and follow and support?
Well, the Makery has a website, makery.la, because we're on Los Angeles Street in Los Angeles. So I had to get the .la tag. So makery.la is our website. Me personally, I'm Lovejoy Art everywhere. So lovejoyart.com is my website. I'm Lovejoy Art on Facebook and Instagram. And
thank you. I appreciate you taking the time for this.
You're very welcome. Thank you.